stories. Hunting is an avid hobby of mine and runs in my family. My favorite animals to catch are deer and boars, as they are quite a challenge to catch, and I love a challenge. As well as general hunting, camping in the woods is therapeutic for me, as you are in nature's natural habitat, which can be greatly enjoyed when by yourself. Accompanying this are the type of people you meet whilst hiking. I've met people who shared their food and campfire with me, and some even hiked with me in the gorgeous wilderness we call the woods, but most of the time it's your animal friends who accompany you whilst walking and camping. I wish the story was about all of the above, but things took a plummet for the worst, and this is my story. I had recently completed an assignment which I would like to describe as long-winded and quite boring, even though it was my favorite topic, human biology. Due to this, I've decided to take a 5-day hike across a vast stretch of woods, brilliant for hunting apparently. As a hunting enthusiast, I decided to hunt for some deer and possibly some boars if I came across any, so I prepped up my water filter, packed my tranquilizer and hunting equipment as well as my pop-up tent and some snacks high in energy, and took the 3.5-hour drive to my destination. I was stoked and excited as I loved camping and hunting, as I could unwind around nature and overall enjoy the atmosphere the woods provided. After what seemed like days behind the wheel, I arrived at what looked like an abandoned parking lot at 3:30 p.m. As well as the bays were empty and the ranger's office looked as if it hadn't been occupied for years, but I brushed it off, parked up, and began my hike. The place gave me a very uneasy vibe, as if the woods beyond the ranger's office was sinister in a way. I can't really describe what gave me this uneasiness, but honestly I chalked it up to the place looking abandoned and creepy either way. I headed out onto the path and began scouting the area for animals. I've got to be quite honest, this set of woods was exquisite. The sun was shining through the trees and the animals were up and active, and I came across a few deer, but no boars unfortunately. Fast forward to 8:30 p.m. It was uneventful, to be honest, and it was getting pretty dark and gloomy, as it is mid-November. Now, I need to add that I'm quite a paranoid guy, as I was burglarized at the age of 15, and all was okay in the end. But that paranoia of something or someone lurking in the shadows stays with me in the back of my mind when I'm out alone at night. Anyway, excuse the babbling. I then whip up a fire, cook up some marshmallows, and warmed up some beans, and I ate away, minding my own business. After this, I decided to go for a late-night hunt, as I did a 2-week course on how to hunt prey in the woods when it's dark, and I think it really paid off. 15 minutes later, I put the fire out as I was prepared to go on a late-night hunt, but then my blood ran as cold as ice, and my hands started to shake when I saw a silhouette of a person about 100 meters away from me. It was unexpected, so I internally freaked the fuck out. As well as this, I noticed a small pocket knife in their left hand, and it looked like they were crouching and stalking something as they had their knife out at the ready. I believed it was a man about 6 feet tall, and his back was facing me. So I believed that he didn't notice I was there, which I took as a godsend. However, it could just be another hunter, like myself. After shitting bricks whilst watching this man for 5 minutes, he disappeared into the inky night, and I got over it pretty quickly, as I thought he was a fellow hunter like myself. I honestly wished that that was the case. Fast forward an hour, and it's around 9:45 p.m., and I'm feeling confident enough to go back out into the black wilderness and catch a deer or two, or maybe even a boar. I pinpointed where my tent was with the map and went on my way with my hunting equipment. 10 minutes later, I'm practically in no man's land, as everywhere around me was pitch black, but I knew what I was doing. I was stalking a deer, which hadn't noticed me, and was about 50 meters in front of me. Plodding around the eerie woods, I grabbed my tranquilizer and placed the deer in my sights. That was when I heard twigs snap, my eyes darted, my legs went into jelly mode, and I jerked my neck to the source of the noise. What the fuck? A fucking silhouette appeared out of the trees to the left of me, about 50 yards away, and just watched me. Not the deer, but me. The deer was long gone now, so it was just me and an unwanted guest. His size concluded to me that he was the same guy as before, 6 feet, roughly 200 pounds. He stared at me, and I stared back. My body still was stone, but my sudden outburst of adrenaline was making me shake. I couldn't see his face, as it was too dark. Fuck. Was he a late-night human butcher? Am I not going to see the light of day again? I just about choked out. Who's there? I tried to say in the calmest voice I could do, but fear was evident when I asked the question. The man raised the hand with his pocket knife and pointed his index finger towards me. That was it. I fucking bolted it north, whilst mildly tripping up and hitting my head off of a tree branch. Twigs snapped rapidly behind me as this son of a bitch was chasing me. I looked back once and saw his vacant right hand brushing tree branches to the side of him, his knife gripped tightly in his left hand. I then realized that during it all, I dropped my tranquilizer. Fuck that shit, I can buy another one. I know I should have shot the guy, but it's amazing what one can forget in a horrific situation, even if it's a gun. I wasn't going back for it. A ton of thoughts were going through my mind whilst I was fleeing. Why me? What does he want? Money? My food? What could it fucking be? That was when I honestly thought I pissed myself, as he then said in a rapid tone, "Isn't this fun?" He then had the goddamn audacity to start laughing in a patronizing way, and I couldn't take it anymore. I sped up, and I'll tell you now, it's amazing what the human body can do when adrenaline and natural instinct takes over. I never ran so fast in my life. I made a hard right, dived into some bushes nearby, quietly, and eventually lost the guy. I heard his footsteps go to the opposite way, and it turns out that I went in a huge circle. As I could see my tent only 50 meters from me, I was fucking shaking, and tears were starting to form, but I had to stay strong. I just had to. What would my father do in this situation? I turned my ears into the inky darkness and heard nothing, and I saw nothing. I was not going to turn on my phone torch, as I had been an open target. I checked my watch, and it was now 10:30 p.m. I've been in the tent for 10 minutes now. I sat still in my tent, listening to every small noise I could hear in the woods. I held in my gasp as I heard a twig behind the tent, and with that accompanied a low and sinister voice. "You think you could run? I win." With that, my tent was being sliced open, and the fucker popped his head in. He was licking his fucking lips, and his wide eyes locked with my eyes. "You lose," he screams as he pulls the knife out. Fighting, not my strong point, but the gym made me a pretty strong guy. So as he tried to stab me, I grabbed both of his arms and fended him off from plunging a blade into my torso. I tried to disarm the fucker, and he laughed during the process. I thought he was trying to intimidate me. However, I was ready to kill, not a deer, not a boar, but a man, a human. I restrained his left wrist, but his knife was inches away from going into my foot, so I stepped onto his right hand, pulled back on his left wrist, then snapped. His left wrist snapped, and he let out a blood-curdling scream. I had the upper hand and fucking took advantage of it. I got the knife from his distorted, shattered hand and gave him a taste of his own fucking medicine. I sunk the knife into his right hand, and he screamed. I lay in a few punches, and I think I popped his nose, but I had no regrets. I grabbed my arm in pain as he made me bend it in an awkward position. When he was on top of me, when he first ripped the tent open, but honestly, I couldn't care about my injuries. He tried to kick me, but I punched him in the face until he was unconscious. I checked my phone, and I had no phone service. Fuck, I panted. I picked up this fucker into a fireman's lift. I remembered my way to the ranger's office as it was exactly west from my tent. After an hour of struggling with the killer on my shoulders, out cold, I found the ranger's station, and to my surprise, a young man around 20 was there. I collapsed to my knees as I explained the situation. As it turns out, the guy slashed my left bicep, but the adrenaline numbed out the pain, so when it wore off, I suddenly was in pain and noticed the laceration. The ranger called for backup, and they eventually arrived. I don't know how long it took. Fuck my belongings. I was not going to go back out there to retrieve them. The ranger offered to drive me to the nearest hospital in my car, and I did. The Night Stalker was taken away, but was semi-conscious. The next day, I woke up in the hospital bed to an officer, and what he said next was burned into my memory, never to be erased. When I first saw the killer, his back was towards me, knife in his left hand, and was crouching. As I mentioned earlier, it turns out that he was stalking another hiker, who he had brutally murdered and mutilated at the scene. They found chloroform at the scene, hence me not hearing any screams or cries for help. I vowed from there onwards to never go hunting again by myself. The next time I went hunting was half a year after this incident with 4 other mates, and although the woods has a beautiful atmosphere and vibe, never judge a book by its cover, as the tables can turn within a blink of an eye. For all of you going camping and hunting, stay safe, and remember, don't think that things can't happen to you as well. This started during the summer. Me and 3 of my friends, Lola, Katie, and Jennifer, were all planning to go camping. We were all excited and scared at the same time because we were going camping alone. Lola asked her dad if he could drop us off. He agreed to take us. When the next day came, we started headed up. Lola's dad set up the camper that we were using. There are some spare blankets inside in case you get cold, her dad said. Before leaving, Lola's dad finally got in his truck and turned around. He stopped and rolled down the window and said, "No boys," smiled to let us know he was joking, and drove off. There were 3 rooms in the trailer, 1 master bedroom and 2 rooms with bunks. Each room had a TV in it, so nobody cared what room they got. Everyone knew that Jennifer didn't like small rooms, so we let her have the big room. I was in a room with Lola, and Katie was in a room by herself. I started unpacking when we heard a loud boom outside. "Lola, did you hear that?" "Hear what?" "The boom." "Yeah." We both looked at each other, startled, and then continued unpacking. But something seemed off. It was the fact that Lola was so chill about it. I was done unpacking, so I walked outside and started a fire. Jennifer walked out, and asked if I saw it. I asked saw what. Then she started freaking me out. She was staring behind me, panicking. Her eyes darted back and forth, and then she calmed. I felt as if something was watching me, so I turned around. I saw an orb in the corner of my eye, reddish black. But by the time I turned to look, it was gone. I was freaked out. I told Katie she could cook instead. We had her family's secret recipe of shepherd's pie and a bunch of vanilla cupcakes. There were about a dozen cupcakes left in the open box, so we just left it on the table and went to bed. I could hear the TV coming from Katie's room, so I punched the wall and told her to be quiet. Right after I said it, everything went quiet except for a small scream in the distance. It didn't sound human. It gave me chills that ran down my spine. I dozed off, but woke up in the middle of the night from hearing someone in the kitchen. I woke up Lola. Then we walked out into the small hallway that led into the kitchen. I saw Jennifer sitting on the table, staring straight ahead. Something touched me. I jumped and realized it was just Katie, seeing what was making the weird sounds. Jennifer was really creeping me out. She never stared into space this often. But then I noticed something in the corner of my eye. It was a shadowy figure. It was just staring at Jennifer and slowly turned to face me and Katie. I froze. Katie froze. Jennifer then looked at us as if being mind-controlled. Then the figure ran out the window, and Jennifer then dropped her head onto the table. We tried to wake her up, but ended up falling asleep. This experience still scares me to this day, and it is only one of the creepiest things I have seen. Me and the others are still very close friends. We live together now, but we all remember that night, and whatever it was we saw, it turns out Jennifer remembers seeing it in the daylight, but was out cold when the rest of us saw it. It freaks us out even more now, knowing that our friend wasn't even awake and staring into space, eyes wide open. For some reason, I am a person that attracts weirdos. I am really cute and nice to people, and I'm also awkward in an adorable type of way. Unfortunately, despite all of these qualities, the crazies are always drawn to me. My day started off normal enough. My normal weekend routine went according to plan. Only this day, I met a surprisingly nice guy who really seemed to have everything going for himself. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was jogging in the park in my neighborhood. As I came around the bend of the street that neared my house, there he stood, this gorgeous man. He looked like he had just stepped out of a GQ magazine. Nice suit and tie, dressed to the nines. He smiled and said hi to me, and then proceeded to tell me how cute I was, and asked for my number. Honestly, I was shocked that such a hot guy would be interested in me. I was in my yoga tank and shorts, hair tied back, no makeup, sweaty from the jog, etc. But no alarm bells went off yet. Anyway, I obliged, gave him my number, and got his, then went on my way. Within a few seconds of getting into my doorway, my phone went off. It was him texting. I found it odd that he would be texting so quickly, but I brushed it off as nerves maybe, and sent emojis back. I thought nothing else of it for the rest of the day. I turned my cell phone off and proceeded to take a nap. This is when another alarm should have gone off in my head, but I let it slide yet again. When I turned on my cell phone after I woke up, there were countless text messages, phone calls, and voice messages from the guy asking why I didn't answer his texts and his calls. I found this very strange, to be hounding someone you just met hours earlier as if you two were already in a relationship, so I called him and told him if he didn't chill out, he should lose my number. He apologized and said it would not happen again. He then proceeded to ask me out on a date. I accepted, thinking what harm could come from going out for dinner and getting to know one another. Fast forward to date night, I found out a lot more about him, like his prestigious educational background and his family's social standing. Let's just say they are a very prominent group of people. I was intrigued, and everything seemed to be going fine. That is, until he started mumbling to himself. At first, I thought it was just me overthinking things, but when he started to answer his own questions, I got freaked out. While he continued to mumble to himself, I interjected, "Hey, is there anything you'd like to talk about?" He replied firmly, "No." Well, at this moment, I knew this would be our first and last date, and I suddenly understood why a handsome man from a well-to-do family was still single. It was clear to me that he had mental issues that needed to be addressed by a mental health care professional. It was also clear to me that I would not be seeing him again for any more dates. For some reason, I really can't pinpoint how, but it seemed clear to him as well. So we ate our dinner. The rest of the date went into complete silence and went on our separate ways, or so I thought. A couple of weeks went by, and I was relieved that he hadn't contacted me, and I was thinking it was very obvious that the first date was horrible and unnerving, and that we'd never see each other again. I mean, I wasn't ghosting, but there was really nothing further to discuss at this point. There wasn't going to be any more dates or any more interactions for that matter. I was wrong. A couple of Saturdays later, I was on my usual jog path, and guess who else was there this time in workout gear, smiling from ear to ear, running towards me? None other than Prince Charming himself. I was mortified. "Hey, you," he exclaimed with excitement. "Oh, hi, how are you?" I answered uneasily. He replied, "Okay, just thinking about you and our future together." I was at a loss for words at this point, and then it dawned on me that if I didn't make my point clear that I wasn't interested in him, that this sort of thing will continue to go on, because he is not catching on the non-communication hint. So I said, "Look, you're a nice guy, but I don't think you're the guy for me. I wish you the best in life. Good luck." Well, he said he understood and kept on with his run as I proceeded to head home. I truly thought that that was the end of it, but after another weekend passed, he began sending text messages again like a maniac, back to back, begging and pleading for another date, because he knew I was the one, and his family wanted him to settle down and get married soon, and how he'd surely die without me. I didn't answer. I just blocked his number. Now, I was just over the nonsense. The next day, my family went on our annual camping trip. This is when shit got real. He starts calling me from random numbers, saying he knows where I am, and he was watching me. Initially, I shrugged it off, but when he told me what state my family and I were camping in, I freaked the fuck out, because I hadn't told him any of this. He proceeded to tell me how anything could happen to me or my family because of how powerful and connected his family was, and how they made people disappear. I told him to fuck off and to leave me alone, but to no avail. The harassment continued off and on for another month. During that time, whenever I would leave the house to go to work, run errands, or just get out, I would notice his car parked across the street from my house watching me. I never told him where I lived. We'd only been on one date, for God's sake. I was in a lot of distress, barely sleeping because every little sound I would hear in the night I would think it was him trying to break into my house. I tried to remain vigilant and undaunted in his presence because I didn't want him to think I was afraid of him and his antics. He knew everything about me, things we had never discussed, and continued to threaten bodily harm if he didn't get his way. I stayed steadfast, but finally decided to tell my best friend, who is in the military and works in law enforcement, about the ordeal, just to get some insight on my legal options to see if I could get some help. My best friend asked for his name. I'd only remembered his first name, so he traced him by his phone numbers, many of which were registered to him or his close family members. I don't know what my best friend did or said, but I haven't had any more of these terrifying ordeals happen. I am grateful he didn't follow through with his threats to harm me. I learned my lesson. Just because someone is drop-dead gorgeous doesn't mean they can't be batshit crazy.
So my family owns a cabin on a small lake in New Hampshire. We go there every summer. It's basically our home away from home. There are other houses on the lake, quite a few near us. Beyond that, it's a pretty rural area. Miles of woods stretch beyond the lake houses, so there's really no reason to be in the area unless you were hunting, own a lake house, or were visiting the lake for whatever reason. So one night, maybe 6 years ago, it was late, probably around midnight, my ex and I were laying in bed, chatting about whatever. All of a sudden, we hear footsteps outside the window. The window lays only about halfway up on the wall to the side of the bed, and is situated so that it opens right at the bottom of the bed where our feet are. The ground around the house is covered in a layer of pine needles that dropped from above, so it's pretty hard to walk quietly, but the footsteps sounded like whatever was making them were trying their best to not be heard. They sounded relatively close, but we rationalized to ourselves that they were probably made from some sort of animal. A couple of minutes go by and we hear them again, except this time they seemed closer. They seemed to be right outside the window, still trying to move quietly. At this point, the two of us are starting to get a little freaked out. To our mutual horror, we look down and see a hand slowly coming through the window. Obviously, we scream and wake the house up, and my parents come running out of their adjacent room. We tell them what happened, and my father rationalizes it as the event being a figment of our imaginations. To this day, I don't know if he was right. The weird thing is that both my ex and I saw the same thing. So how could it be our imaginations? To this day, I feel uneasy staying in that room, and I always make sure to shut the window before going to bed.
If you're new, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to my channel, as it really helps me out. And if you are already subscribed, welcome back and thank you for subscribing.